Hey guys, tonight we're taking a slow walk through the bustling markets of ancient Athens, a place where democracy hums like bees in sunlight, and everything from fish to philosophy is on sale. You'll drift through the marble heart of the city, where voices echo under open sky, and sandal leather scuffs against worn stone. And don't worry, you probably won't survive this particular morning if you were truly here, with all the questionable seafood and lack of hand sanitizer. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment below telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your walk just as the first light spills across the Athenian hills. The sun crawls over the horizon, washing the Acropolis in honeyed gold, catching on the white marble temples that overlook the city. The air is still cool, a small mercy before the Mediterranean heat settles in later, and there's a faint, earthy scent of dew-soaked dust rising from the flagstones. The streets are already stirring. Somewhere nearby, a rooster is enthusiastically declaring his opinion about everything. From small homes, smoke curls upward from morning hearths as women stir porridge meal of barley meal and men stretch their limbs before another day of work. Athens, even when half asleep, buzzes with purpose. You make your way toward the Agora, the marketplace that is also the city's beating heart. It isn't just where people buy and sell things. It's where ideas are exchanged, deals are struck, and reputations built or ruined. Think of it as a blend between your local farmer's market, a coffee shop, a town hall meeting, and Twitter, but with better sandals and far fewer opinions about NFTs. As you approach, you hear the sound of wooden stalls creaking open. Merchants are arranging amphorae of oil, stacking baskets of figs, and unrolling bolts of dyed fabric. A chorus of greetings rises in the cool morning air, low, familiar, friendly, the city's pulse warming to life. A baker brushes flour off his arms and waves a paddle toward his small clay oven where loaves are beginning to brown. The smell is heavenly, warm, nutty, with that slightly sweet edge of barley. Bread was the comfort food of the ancient world, and you can almost feel your stomach stir just walking past. You notice how organized chaos reigns here. Every trade has its corner. The potters line up near one side, fishmongers closer to the fountain, and spice sellers under the shaded porticos. It's all arranged by custom rather than rule, a soft kind of order that holds together because everyone knows their part. The marble paving beneath your sandals is smooth, worn down by countless generations of feet, philosophers, slaves, merchants, tourists from far-off islands. Some stones still bear faint chisel marks from repairs done decades ago, while others glisten from centuries of wear. It's humbling, in a quiet way, to think that Socrates might have stood right where you're standing, probably annoying some poor olive vendor with questions about virtue. A group of boys run by, laughing, chasing a hoop with a stick. One nearly collides with a basket of onions, earning a sharp scolding from the stallholder. The boy apologizes, but you can tell he'll do it again tomorrow. Youthful chaos seems as eternal as the Parthenon. As the sun rises higher, the sounds deepen. Carts creak, goats bleat, and bronze bells tinkle faintly as pack animals are led through the streets. The Agora fills with the music of daily life, rhythmic footsteps, the rustle of linen tunics, and the occasional clatter of dropped coins bouncing against stone. You pause near the edge of the square where a few men are debating over the placement of stalls. "This space was mine last market day," one insists. "Yes, and you sold nothing," another replies, "so the gods clearly meant for me to have it." Ancient property disputes. Thrilling stuff. Historians still argue whether there was a formal system for stall allocation or if it all depended on who showed up first and shouted loudest. Judging from the volume of this particular argument, you're leaning toward the latter. A lazy cat slinks across your path, tail flicking, uninterested in human squabbles. It finds a patch of sun and curls up immediately, unconcerned that it's lying on the hem of someone's cloak. Cats in Athens, like everywhere, have already mastered the art of getting away with everything. A gust of breeze carries the distant scent of salt and olive groves from beyond the city walls. You can almost see the faint shimmer of the Aegean far away, though the market's rising energy pulls your attention back. A priest of Hermes, god of trade and travel, passes by, murmuring a brief prayer over the stalls. His robe flutters as he walks, leaving a faint trail of incense that smells like myrrh and citrus. It's easy to forget that this isn't just commerce, it's ritual. Every coin, every scale, every handshake carries divine weight. Hermes watches, or so everyone hopes. Merchants often keep a small charm of him nearby, sometimes carved into the shape of a rooster or a winged sandal, as a kind of ancient version of a good luck sign. One quirky tidbit you overhear: a potter swears that rubbing olive oil on his hands before shaping clay gives the pottery a soul. His apprentice rolls his eyes behind his back. Whether or not that's true, the resulting vases do gleam more than most, though perhaps it's just the sunlight catching the wet surface. You stop to watch him work. His wheel spins with hypnotic rhythm, and the clay rises obediently under his touch. It's oddly meditative, the sound of spinning and scraping blending into the hum of voices around you. In the background, a man with a lyre plucks out a lazy tune, something about the goddess Athena and a rather unfortunate satyr who thought he could outplay her. The city itself feels alive now. You can sense the energy rising, like heat from the stones. A young woman with a basket of grapes balances them easily on her head, weaving through the crowd. An old man sells scrolls, probably poetry, maybe philosophy, possibly just recipes for lentil soup. You never know. There's laughter, too, small, fleeting moments that cut through the chatter. Someone jokes that the price of olives is higher than the price of a philosopher's dignity, and everyone nearby chuckles. You smile quietly. It's the kind of humor that survives millennia. The shadows shorten. The marble gleams. You walk deeper into the Agora, past the stoas, long shaded colonnades lined with merchants and thinkers. Each has something to sell: amphorae, jewelry, bronze tools, or simply opinions about the latest decree of the assembly. Here, even gossip is a currency. Historians still argue whether the Athenian marketplace was truly democratic or if it just looked that way, a reflection of privilege disguised as participation. But as you watch a poor farmer trade onions for a strip of linen and a nobleman haggle over the price of perfume, you get the sense that, at least here, everyone breathes the same dusty, fragrant air. Somewhere a bell rings faintly, a signal from a nearby temple perhaps, and for a brief moment the whole scene feels suspended in amber. You stand in the midst of it all, the hum of voices rising like the tide, the sunlight deepening to gold, the promise of the day unfolding before you. You take a deep breath. The air tastes of bread and sea salt, of dust and possibility. The marble underfoot holds the coolness of morning still, but warmth is creeping in. Athens wakes fully now, alive, proud, noisy, and utterly human. You step forward, drawn deeper into its maze of stalls and stories, as the marketplace around you stirs into full bloom. The warmth of the morning sun spreads gently across the Agora now, and as you wander further in, the first thing that catches your attention is the smell, that unmistakable, comforting scent of food waking up the city. It hits you softly at first, freshly baked bread cooling on wooden racks, the faint sweetness of figs split open, the savory drift of olive oil sizzling in a small pan somewhere nearby. Athens, you realize, has its own kind of perfume, part smoke, part spice, part something ancient and alive. You follow it like a sleepy bloodhound through the maze of stalls, your stomach already protesting the injustice of being awake before breakfast. You turn a corner and find the source of that first heavenly aroma. A baker with arms like tree trunks is pulling loaves out of a dome-shaped oven. His apron is ghost white with flour, and his face glows from the heat. He gives you a nod, one of those wordless greetings that says, "You're awake early, good choice." He sets a new loaf on the counter and brushes off a sprinkle of sesame seeds. The bread crackles faintly in the cooler air, the crust hardening just enough to keep the inside tender. You imagine tearing a piece off, dipping it in olive oil, maybe a drizzle of honey. Breakfast fit for a philosopher, or at least someone pretending to be one. A young boy beside him grinds barley with a hand mill, singing softly to himself. The rhythm is steady, almost hypnotic. Grind, scrape, turn. A sound you realize has echoed through Athenian mornings for centuries. You pause to watch, caught in the gentle repetition of it all. Nearby, another vendor calls out, "Fresh oil from yesterday's press, smooth as Athena's mirror." He gestures toward a line of clay amphoras sealed with wax. Their surfaces gleam in the sunlight like tanned skin. You lift one slightly. It's heavier than you expect, cool against your palms. Olive oil was liquid gold in Athens, used for everything from cooking to lamp fuel to skin care. Yes, apparently ancient Athenians moisturized more diligently than most modern influencers. One old woman at the stall tells you with a wink that rubbing olive oil on the skin keeps you young forever. You're tempted to ask her how long she's been trying, but you wisely decide that sarcasm is not the local dialect. As you stroll onward, the air thickens with the scent of herbs and spices. A trader is carefully arranging bundles of dried thyme, mint, and bay leaves, their colors muted but their fragrance sharp. You can almost taste them, peppery, grassy, a little wild. His stall looks like a miniature garden frozen mid-bloom. He offers you a pinch of ground cumin to smell. You lean in and inhale deeply. It's sharp, nutty, warm. He smiles proudly, saying it came all the way from Egypt. By boat, he adds, as if that's the real selling point. You nod appreciatively. Trade across the Mediterranean was a lifeline for Athens. Olive oil and pottery went out. Grain, spices, and luxury goods came in. The whole city depended on those routes, narrow wooden ships braving unpredictable seas. Historians still argue whether the Athenian navy's rise was purely military genius or just the natural evolution of a city that really wanted better cinnamon. A few steps away, you pass a small stand where a woman is selling breakfast porridge. It's made from barley, mixed with water or goat's milk, and sweetened with a hint of honey. She ladles it into clay bowls with practiced grace, handing each one off with a smile and a bit of gossip about her neighbors. You get the sense she knows everyone's business and half their secrets. You watch her work, fascinated by the rhythm of it all. Ladle, smile, exchange coin, repeat. The steam rising from the pot smells faintly nutty, with that simple, comforting aroma that always comes from something made slowly, with care. A few men stand nearby, eating in silence. One dips a piece of bread into his porridge, another sprinkles crushed figs on top. There's no rush here, no frantic gulping of coffee before a commute, just quiet satisfaction under the open sky. A donkey brays somewhere close, startling a group of pigeons into flight. Their wings flash silver in the sunlight before they settle again, scavenging for crumbs. The baker's boy tosses them a few pieces of burnt bread, earning a grateful cooing chorus. You continue along, deeper into the scent maze. The air now hums with overlapping smells: honey, fruit, burning charcoal, and something slightly fishy that warns you the seafood vendors aren't far away. You'll deal with them later. For now, you drift toward the fruit stalls. Pyramids of grapes, apples, and pomegranates sit proudly in wicker baskets. The vendor, a wiry man with an impressive mustache, slices a fig in half and offers it to you. The inside glows pink and gold, tiny seeds shimmering like jewels. You take a small bite. It's impossibly sweet, almost floral, like eating sunlight distilled into fruit. He tells you, with the tone of a man sharing sacred knowledge, that figs were sacred to Dionysus and Demeter, gods of wine and harvest. You nod thoughtfully, wiping a bit of juice from your chin. You'll remember that later, maybe when you pass a temple or when someone inevitably starts selling amulets blessed by Demeter herself. Apparently, some Athenians believed certain herbs could protect against laziness. Basil, mostly. You make a mental note to start rubbing basil leaves on your to-do list. A soft breeze moves through the square, carrying the smell of roasted nuts. You spot a small brazier where a vendor is turning almonds in a shallow pan, coating them with honey. He hums as he works, the caramelizing sugar snapping softly. He hands one to a customer and warns, "Careful, it bites." The customer pops it into his mouth anyway, immediately regrets it, and starts fanning his tongue. Everyone laughs, and the vendor shrugs, saying, "Every lesson needs heat." You can't help but smile. There's something deeply human about this place, the mix of commerce and comedy, labor and laughter. Even as centuries separate you from them, you feel strangely at home. By now, the Agora is fully awake. You can hear snippets of conversation everywhere. Someone discussing the latest play at the Theater of Dionysus, another whispering about a political debate in the assembly, and somewhere in between, a man complaining loudly that his neighbor's goat has more sense than the city council. You pass a group of men carrying wicker baskets filled with olives. Their dark skins glisten in the sun. The olives, that is, though the men are equally shiny from the heat. They laugh as they walk, arguing about whose grove produces the best oil. "Mine tastes of the gods," one insists. "Yours tastes of wet sandals." The olive, that modest little fruit, has built empires, and Athens is no exception. Olive trees covered the surrounding countryside, their twisted trunks symbols of peace, prosperity, and, let's be honest, really good salad dressing. Legend says Athena herself gave the city its first olive tree in a contest against Poseidon. Historians still argue whether this myth reflected actual agriculture policy or just clever civic branding. But either way, the marketing worked. The scents begin to blend now, forming a kind of olfactory music. Every inhalation tells a story: the bread of the farmer, the spice of the merchant, the oil of the goddess. It's intoxicating in its simplicity. You stop beside a small fountain where cool water trickles over marble worn smooth by centuries of use. A woman dips her jug, humming a tune older than the city itself. Children play nearby, splashing their hands and laughing. The sound of the water is soothing, a brief pause amid the marketplace's growing noise. You take another deep breath, letting the mingled aromas of Athens settle into your senses. Somewhere behind you, a baker's laugh echoes. Ahead, a philosopher is already beginning to gather his students for morning debate. The day stretches before you like a freshly unrolled scroll, full of lines yet unwritten. And for now, it smells of bread, olives, and the faint promise of something sweet still to come. The morning has settled into its steady rhythm now, a heartbeat of footsteps, laughter, and voices that rise and fall like waves across the marble square. As you move deeper into the Agora, you realize that sound itself is a kind of currency here. Athens trades not just in goods, but in words. The voices of the market blend into an oddly musical chaos. Merchants calling out prices, buyers pretending to walk away, neighbors greeting each other with long stories instead of short hellos. You don't just hear Athens waking up, you feel it vibrating through the soles of your sandals. You pause beside a stall stacked high with ceramic jars, each one painted with patterns of dolphins and vines. The merchant, a plump man with a face that could convince anyone of anything, catches your eye. "You, traveler," he calls out, "you look like someone who appreciates fine craftsmanship. Come, see this, best oil in Attica." He gestures dramatically to an amphora. You nod politely, and before you can even open your mouth, he launches into a full performance. "Pressed only once, no stones, no tricks. My cousin swears by it, and he's missing half his teeth, so you know he's honest." You can't help but grin. It's all theater here, the art of persuasion as entertainment. The merchant drops his price 3 times before you've even said a word, then declares he's losing money just by showing it to you. The irony, of course, is that this routine is as old as the city itself. Haggling is not just tolerated, it's expected. It's a sport. Everyone plays and everyone pretends to lose. One scholar once described Athenian bargaining as democracy in miniature. Both sides must speak, listen, and pretend the other has a point before anything gets done. Historians still argue whether that's a charming cultural ritual or just an ancient form of mutual exhaustion. As you walk on, the sounds grow richer. To your left, a spice seller rattles off his list like poetry. Cinnamon from Ceylon, coriander from Egypt, pepper from the ends of the earth. To your right, a farmer insists that his grapes are as sweet as Hera's breath, which is probably the kind of flattery that could get him struck by lightning, but business is business. 2 men argue over the price of onions, one of them dramatically clutching his chest as if betrayed. "You wound me, Cleon," he cries. "I am practically giving them away." Cleon, unimpressed, mutters that he'd rather pick wild onions himself. The seller gasps, crosses himself, and calls upon Hermes to witness this insult. Within seconds, a small audience has gathered, some cheering for Cleon, others for the onion seller. You stand there watching, amused, as the argument spirals into a performance. Finally, both men laugh, shake hands, and exchange coins. The crowd disperses. You realize it was never a fight, just part of the rhythm, a little morning drama to keep the day interesting. You pass another stall where a young woman sells wool dyed in deep crimson and soft violet. She calls out prices with a practiced rhythm. 3 drachmas a skein, 2 if you have a good smile. Her tone is teasing, but her hands are all business, measuring and cutting with quick precision. Athens was known for its textiles, from simple homespun linen to fine garments dyed with rare pigments. The famous purple dye, made from crushed sea snails, was so costly that only the wealthiest citizens could afford it. The smell of the dyeing process, according to ancient writers, was not something you'd want near your breakfast. You take a deep breath of the air around you, olives, bread, dust, and silently thank the gods that you're downwind. The chatter continues as you move along the colonnade. A man is reciting lines from a new comedy by Aristophanes, loudly and with questionable accuracy. His friends roar with laughter, one of them nearly spilling his cup of watered wine. You catch a few words, something about politicians and donkeys, and figure not much has changed in 25 centuries. You come to a small table where a thin old man is weighing coins on a bronze scale. The plates sway delicately, gleaming in the sun. His hands move with the slowness of long practice, adding, adjusting, waiting for perfect balance. "Fairness," he mutters, "is the weight between 2 lies." It sounds like something Socrates might have said, though probably less poetic and more confusing. You watch him a moment longer. Money here isn't paper, of course. It's metal, mostly silver, stamped with the owl of Athena. You can feel the faint ridges of the image when you run your thumb along the edge of one. Each coin holds a piece of the city's pride, its craftsmanship, its trust. Historians still argue whether these market interactions, all this haggling and talking, were the foundation of Athenian democracy itself. After all, persuasion and participation were everything in Athens. Maybe the marketplace was its first parliament, where anyone could speak if they could make someone listen. A child tugs at your sleeve, holding up a tiny clay whistle shaped like a bird. "For luck," she says shyly. You hand her a coin, and she beams before darting off into the crowd. You blow into the whistle, and it makes a soft, trilling note, a fragile, joyful sound that somehow cuts through all the noise. Nearby, a group of farmers are unloading sacks of grain. Dust rises in the sunlight as they pour it into large bins. The air smells faintly of straw and sweat. You watch them work, methodical, patient, talking in the shorthand of shared labor. One of them jokes that his donkey eats better than he does. The others laugh, and one replies, "Then perhaps we should elect your donkey." Laughter ripples through the air again, blending seamlessly with the rhythm of trade. You notice how natural it all seems. No loudspeakers, no clocks, no formal opening hours. Just people arriving when they're ready, leaving when they've sold enough or talked enough, or both. You stop to rest in the shade of a column, leaning against the cool marble. The hum of the Agora stretches before you, layered, living, endless. It's easy to imagine the same sounds echoing here thousands of mornings ago. The clink of coins, the clatter of amphorae, the shuffle of sandals. The melody of daily life, perfectly imperfect. You overhear a merchant complaining that his rival's figs are too cheap to be honest. He must be watering them with wine, he grumbles. Another jokes that maybe that's why the philosophers keep visiting his stall. You chuckle quietly, realizing that the marketplace isn't just a center of trade. It's the city's rumor mill, comedy club, and complaint department rolled into one. Every conversation overlaps with another, like ripples on a pond. You can never tell where one ends and the next begins. As you start walking again, a sudden shout cuts through the air. A man drops a jar, and it shatters spectacularly. Everyone nearby winces at once. The merchant groans, clutching his head. "Hermes, take me now," he mutters dramatically. But a moment later, he's laughing, sweeping up the pieces and calling to a passerby, "You see, proof my jars are real clay, not cheap imports from Corinth." Athenians, it seems, could turn even disaster into advertisement. A gentle breeze moves through the Agora, carrying away the smell of dust and sun-warmed stone. You listen, really listen, and for a heartbeat, all the overlapping sounds blend into one endless hum, the language of the city itself. It's comforting somehow, knowing that every shout, every laugh, every bargain is part of that same rhythm. You walk on, deeper into the chorus of voices, feeling your pace slow to match its pulse. The market around you thrums with life, and you realize that in Athens, words themselves are as valuable as silver, and often far more entertaining. The air grows warmer as you wander past the crowded center of the Agora and toward the row of potters' workshops. The soundscape changes here. Fewer shouts and haggles, more rhythm and scrape. The hum of trade gives way to the slow, steady spin of wheels, the soft slap of clay, and the occasional muttered curse when a pot collapses mid-shape. You follow the scent first, that dry, dusty tang of sun-baked clay mixed with smoke from the kilns. It's earthy and strangely soothing, like the smell of rain before it falls. The potter's quarter sits just beyond the main stalls, under a long awning that provides shade for both craftsman and curious onlooker. The marble under your sandals gives way to packed earth scattered with fragments of broken pottery, shards of stories, really. A handle here, a piece of painted wing there, 1,000 little remnants of someone's best work and worst day. You pause near a man bent over a spinning wheel. His hands are slick with water and clay, fingers moving with the confidence of someone who's done this 1,000 mornings before. He barely looks up as you approach. "Careful," he murmurs. The clay listens before it obeys. You're not sure if that's philosophy or just good advice. In Athens, it's probably both. He dips his hand into a bowl of water and flicks a few drops onto the turning lump. Instantly, the shape responds, rising, narrowing, widening again. It's mesmerizing. The wheel hums softly, and your mind begins to match its rhythm. You can almost forget the bustle behind you, the market, the noise, the heat. Here, everything moves at a slower tempo. "Most people think pottery is just mud and patience," the potter says without looking up. "But the clay remembers what you do to it. Treat it gently and it stays loyal. Rush it and it betrays you in the kiln." He glances up at you with a grin that's half pride, half warning. Historians still argue whether Athenian potters saw themselves as craftsmen or artists. The truth, standing here, seems obvious. Both. Every amphora, every kylix, every small jug or bowl is a conversation between hand and earth. Some are made purely for trade, sturdy, plain, functional. Others, though, carry mythic scenes, painted with precision so fine it could make modern illustrators cry softly into their styluses. A younger apprentice nearby grinds pigments on a flat stone. The colors look dull until he mixes them with a little water. Then they spring to life, rich black, deep red, ochre gold. You recognize that famous palette of Athenian pottery, born from iron-rich clay and the genius of those who learned to coax fire into pigment. He points proudly to a finished vase drying on a shelf, a red figure crater showing Heracles wrestling a lion. "That's my master's work," he says, straightening his back. He says the trick is to give the figures breath. You lean closer. The muscles of the painted hero seem to move, even in stillness. Maybe the boy's right. Maybe breath can live in clay after all. At another table, a painter crouches low, brush poised between finger and thumb like a calligrapher's pen. He's outlining a scene of daily life. Women fetching water, a child chasing a dog, a man balancing a basket on his head. You realize how rare that is. Not every vase tells of gods and battles. Some simply capture the small, ordinary rhythms of human existence, the quiet heroism of laundry day. He glances up and says softly, "People remember gods through temples, but they remember themselves through pottery." Then he returns to his brushstrokes, steady and sure. You make a mental note that this man would probably have a very popular quote account on ancient Greek Instagram. A breeze stirs, scattering fine clay dust into the sunlight like mist. You wipe your face with your sleeve, leaving behind a faint streak that makes you look like you've already failed at pottery class. One of the artisans chuckles and tosses you a damp rag. "Happens to everyone their first day," he says. "Next, you'll start calling your mistakes decorative features." A soft laugh escapes you. The easy humor here feels different from the chaos of the market. Calmer, friendlier, anchored by craft. These people don't just sell things, they make them, shape them, burn them, test them. Every piece tells a story of time, temperature, and temperament. Nearby, a kiln door opens with a crack and a puff of heat. The air ripples. The master potter peers inside, squinting at the glow. The smell of baking clay thickens, earthy and faintly metallic. "Too much air and they blister," he mutters to himself. "Too little and they suffocate." You nod solemnly, pretending to understand the thermodynamics of 5th century BCE ceramics. As the potter checks his work, you notice several broken pots stacked neatly by the wall. Their shards have been swept into piles, fragments destined to be recycled into new clay, or, failing that, used as filler for building roads. Nothing truly wasted, not even failure. A small sign of Athens' quiet efficiency, centuries before sustainability became fashionable. One quirky rumor you overhear from a passing vendor? Supposedly, some potters would secretly sign their vases with tiny self-portraits hidden in the decorations. A painted face peeking from behind a god's shield, or a little hand lifting a brush. Historians still argue whether those signatures were pride or rebellion against anonymity. Either way, you decide it's charmingly human. The eternal artist's urge to whisper, "I was here." A group of children crowd around one workshop, watching a demonstration. The potter takes a lump of clay and spins it into a cup right before their eyes. They gasp as the shape emerges, like magic. One boy reaches out to touch it and gets a playful tap on the wrist. "Not yet," the potter says. "Even clay needs time to breathe." The boy nods solemnly, as if learning a sacred truth. You drift along the line of stalls, eyes tracing the endless array of designs. Some jars gleam black and red with stories of gods and monsters. Others are simple: rough clay mugs, oil lamps, bowls meant for soup and salt. You realize these aren't museum pieces here. They're just life. Every home, every meal, every prayer touches clay. A few stalls down, an old woman sells miniature figurines, tiny terracotta horses, owls, and little busts of Athena with her owl perched proudly beside her. She tells you these are for household shrines, or maybe just good luck charms. You pick up one small owl, its eyes wide and curious. The woman smiles. "For wisdom," she says, or for keeping nosy neighbors away. She winks. You decide this particular owl has earned your coin. The afternoon light glows deeper now, casting everything in a warm haze. The red of the pottery seems to catch fire in the sun. You watch as one artisan dips a finished vase into a vat of thin glaze, the surface shimmering like liquid glass. He lifts it carefully, the glaze dripping in rhythmic streams. When it dries, it will darken to that rich, glossy black you've seen in museums, the color of night baked into clay. You linger a moment longer, taking in the harmony of movement. Spinning wheels, dipping brushes, soft chatter, the crackle of the kiln. There's something deeply satisfying about it all. Creation born from patience, beauty born from necessity. And as you turn to leave, a voice calls out behind you. "Remember," shouts the potter with the clay-streaked hands, "if you ever try it yourself, always center the clay first. Life's easier when you start from the middle." You smile, promising to remember the advice, even if you suspect he meant more than pottery. The market's noises swell again as you rejoin the main path. The hum of trade, the cries of merchants, the laughter of strangers. But part of you still carries that slower rhythm, the turning of the wheel, the patience of clay waiting for fire. The path from the potter's quarter winds gently back toward the heart of the Agora, where the smell of clay gives way to something richer, the unmistakable scent of pressed olives and fermenting grapes. The air feels heavier here, thick with the perfume of oil and wine and the faint buzz of bees drawn to sweetness. You follow it like a thread, drifting toward the merchants who trade in the lifeblood of Athens. It begins with the glint of sunlight on rows of amphorae, tall, slender jars lined up like sentinels, each sealed with wax and marked by painted symbols, a branch for oil, a bunch of grapes for wine, an ear of barley for grain. The shapes are elegant but practical. Narrow necks to slow evaporation, pointed bases for easy stacking on ships. They are, in a sense, the shipping containers of the ancient world. A man in a faded blue tunic is arranging them now, rolling one gently into place. He's broad-shouldered, his arms browned by sun and labor. When you approach, he gives you a genial nod. "From my family's grove in Attica," he says proudly, thumping the nearest jar. "First press of the season, smooth as poetry, sharp as a Spartan." You smile at the comparison. He grins wider, pleased that you appreciate the joke, and pries open the wax seal. The scent that rises is divine, green, peppery, alive. He dips a small piece of bread into the golden liquid and offers it to you. The taste is both bitter and bright, the kind of flavor that speaks of long summers and patient trees. "Each drop," he says, "comes from trees older than my grandfather's grandfather. They've seen wars, plagues, and politicians, yet they keep giving." You sense reverence in his voice, and not just for profit. To the Greeks, the olive tree was sacred, Athena's gift, a symbol of peace and prosperity. Cutting one down without permission was a crime, damaging one almost sacrilege. He gestures toward a small clay lamp for sale on his table. Oil doesn't only feed the body, he says, it feeds the light. You glance at the flickering flame within, dancing gently in the daylight. The oil burns clean and steady, a quiet miracle in every home. Just beyond his stall, another vendor stands behind a table of wine amphorae, each stamped with the mark of its region: Chios, Lesbos, Thassos. He wears a wreath of ivy around his head, perhaps more for humor than devotion, but the gesture nods to Dionysus all the same. "Care to taste the sea in a cup?" he calls to passers-by. He lifts a jug and pours a deep red stream into a ceramic cup. You notice he mixes it with water first, about 3 parts water to 1 part wine. To modern ears, it may sound like blasphemy, but here, to drink unmixed wine would mark you as barbaric, or worse, unrefined. He swirls the cup and hands it to you with a flourish. "From the island of Lesbos," he says, "the vines grow where the sea winds sing to them." You take a cautious sip. The taste is mellow, slightly salty, with a warmth that blooms at the back of your throat. He watches your face and smiles knowingly. "Ah, you hear it too." You ask about his craft, and he begins to talk, not like a salesman, but like a poet. He describes the yearly rhythm of harvest and crush, of treading grapes in great stone vats, of the slow fermentation in sealed jars buried underground. Wine, he says, is memory in liquid form. Each jar holds a season, the heat, the rains, the laughter of those who pick the grapes. A group of men nearby are sampling from another stall, laughing over a cup. One raises his drink and declares, "To Dionysus, who teaches us that even joy must be measured." His friends cheer, though a few spill more than they sip. You can't help but smile. Restraint is rarely the strong suit of those who toast to moderation. Moving on, you notice a cluster of olive merchants offering different varieties, some plump and dark, others small and pale green. They sit in open baskets, glistening in the sun, swimming in brine. A woman in a crimson shawl leans over her stall, explaining proudly that her olives come from Marathon, where even the soil remembers courage. She pops one into your hand, firm, salty, slightly smoky. "Good for the heart," she says, "and the skin, and the soul." You suspect she could sell olives to an olive tree. On the table beside her, bottles of olive oil infused with herbs. Thyme, oregano, bay shimmer in the light. Each one smells like a fragment of the countryside. She tells you how the oil isn't only for cooking, but also for cleansing the body, anointing athletes, soothing wounds, and even honoring the dead. We are all glazed in oil from birth to burial, she says softly. Beyond her, another stall displays spices and dried herbs from distant lands. Cinnamon from the east, pepper from India, saffron from Asia Minor. The colors are intoxicating, reds, golds, browns. You realize how much of the Greek world's wealth flowed through these stalls. Athenian merchants traded olive oil and pottery for exotic luxuries that came from thousands of miles away. A pair of philosophers are debating nearby, cups of watered wine in hand. One argues that moderation is the soul of virtue. The other insists that a little indulgence sharpens the senses. You suspect both are tipsy enough that neither argument is winning. A small amphora catches your eye, painted with a scene of a symposium. Men reclining on couches, cups raised, musicians playing lyres. The vendor notices your gaze. That, he says, is what all this is for. Not just to eat and drink, but to gather, to talk, to remember the gods. He leans closer. You know the trick of good wine, he whispers. It opens the tongue before it dulls the mind. The first cup for friendship, the second for truth, the third for sleep. After that, you're no philosopher, only a fool. You laugh, wondering how many Athenians ever stopped at the third cup. As the afternoon stretches on, the light grows golden, glinting off the amphorae, until the whole row looks like a river of bronze. The smell of wine and oil mixes with the dust and the hum of voices. The Agora alive, pulsing with trade and talk and sunlight. A young servant hurries past, balancing 2 jugs on a yoke. He moves quickly but carefully, knowing one slip could mean a day's wages lost in a heartbeat. You watch him vanish into the crowd and think about how many unseen hands keep this city alive. The growers, the pickers, the sailors who brave the sea to bring the harvest home. At one stall, an old man tells a legend about the first olive tree, how Athena struck her spear into the ground and brought forth the gray-green leaves of peace. Poseidon gave them salt water, he says, but she gave them sustenance. He pauses, dipping a finger into a small bowl of oil. That's why we still light her flame. You glance toward the Acropolis, faint in the distance, where the Parthenon gleams like bone in the sun. Somewhere up there, a sacred olive tree still grows, descendant of that mythical gift. The thought settles over you gently, the way some stories refuse to die because they still feel true. The sun lowers, shadows lengthen. Merchants begin to cover their jars with cloth, tying them neatly with rope. The laughter softens, the crowd thins. You walk slowly through the dimming rows, past the fading gleam of amphorae and the lingering sweetness of wine in the air. You take one last breath. Oil, grapes, dust, sunlight. The scent of a civilization preserved in memory and clay. Then you step onward, the murmur of the Agora following you like a lullaby, soft and ancient, carrying you deeper into the calm rhythm of the city. The Agora exhales, and so do you, a slow breath of earth, oil, and evening light. The air shifts before you even see them. A salty tang sneaks in from nowhere, blending with dust and olive oil, and you know exactly what's ahead. The fishmonger's quarter of the Agora has its own presence, noisy, pungent, alive. You follow the scent like a sea breeze guiding you through sun-bleached marble lanes until the chorus of gulls, merchants, and splashing water greets you in unison. There's a public fountain at the edge of the market, a semicircle of cool stone where women fill jars and children chase the spray. Around it, the fish stalls cluster like barnacles, each shaded by linen canopies that flap lazily in the morning wind. The marble underfoot is slick with meltwater. Somewhere, a fisherman is loudly insisting his octopus was still singing hymns to Poseidon this morning. You pause to take it all in. The metallic glint of scales, the slap of tails on wood, the endless bargaining. The sound alone could keep the sea awake. A heavy-set man with a bristly beard waves you over. "You look like someone who appreciates freshness," he bellows, then gestures proudly to a table spread with gleaming silver fish, their eyes clear as polished glass. "Caught at dawn near Piraeus," he says. "They practically leapt into the net to escape the philosophers." You can't help smiling. He chuckles, pleased at his own joke. He holds up a small red mullet, its scales shimmering like tiny rubies. "This one," he says, "was the favorite of the rich. They like to watch it change color before it dies." He shakes his head. "Too much money makes people strange, eh?" That, you recall, is true. Roman writers later recorded this very custom. Wealthy Athenians paying for exotic fish just to admire their fading hues before the cook prepared them. You quietly wonder if that's more disturbing or just morbidly poetic. The fishmonger tosses the mullet back into the crushed ice. "Now, if you want something honest," he says, "try the sardines. Cheap, tasty, and they don't complain about philosophy." He scoops a few into a woven basket. "You fry these in olive oil, maybe a pinch of thyme. That's happiness right there." As he speaks, a woman beside him calls out prices in a practiced rhythm, voice rising and falling like the tide. "Tunny fish, fresh cuttlefish, 2 drachmas for a fine mackerel." Her sleeves are rolled high, and she works with swift precision, gutting fish and wrapping them in fig leaves for her customers. A cat sits on a nearby barrel, pretending not to care, its tail flicking every time a piece of fish lands too close. You notice how organized the chaos actually is. Each stall specializes. One in shellfish, another in salted eels, another in the small oily fish used for sauces. Amphorae of brine glisten in the shade, filled with pickled anchovies bound for homes across Athens. "See that one?" the bearded man says, pointing to a large tuna laid out on a slab. "That's worth more than a philosopher's honesty." He winks, which is saying something. You laugh again, and he seems to appreciate the company. He tells you that most of the fish come from the port of Piraeus, just a few miles away, where boats unload their catches at dawn. The fastest sellers rush here immediately, hoping to sell their haul before the midday sun turns it into a sculpture. "Speed," he says, "is the soul of good fish." He offers you a thin slice of something smoked, salty, savory, still soft. "Try this," he says. "We preserve them with salt from Hymettus Hilm. Makes the flavor dance." The taste is strong and earthy, the sea condensed into a single bite. As you eat, he gestures to a small shrine tucked beside the fountain, a stone relief showing a dolphin leaping beside a trident. Someone has placed a few fish bones and sprigs of thyme at its base. "That's for Poseidon and the Nereids," he explains. "We give thanks and sometimes apologies," he grins. "The sea feeds us, but she also keeps score." You glance toward the water glittering in the fountain. Children are playing, splashing their feet, while a woman rinses a basket of clams. The scene feels timeless, an eternal moment of ordinary life preserved in motion. You can almost hear the hum of centuries beneath the chatter. Near the edge of the fountain, an old man with a weathered face is carefully cleaning fishing nets. He hums softly, a melody that sounds like a lullaby to the sea. You crouch near him and ask if he's a fisherman. "Was," he says, "before my back decided it preferred land." He smiles faintly. "Now I mend nets for those who still dance with Poseidon." He tells you a story, how years ago he once caught a fish with strange markings that resembled letters. The priest said it was an omen. Historians still argue whether that was divine writing or just a fisherman's tall tale, he says, eyes twinkling. But me, I sold it for a good price either way. You chuckle, and he nods toward the market. These stalls, he says, have seen every kind of soul. The honest, the cunning, the hungry, the curious. You don't come here just for food. You come here to feel alive. You thank him and stand, stretching. The air is thick now with heat and the smell of salt and smoke. Someone is grilling small fish over charcoal. The crackle of oil mingles with laughter and gossip. A group of boys dart between the stalls, shouting about a monster fish that supposedly escaped a basket, though the monster turns out to be a slippery eel making a dramatic break for freedom. It slides across the stones, pursued by a trail of laughter. At the far edge, a woman sells salted fish paste packed in small clay jars, garos, the ancestor of Roman garum. She offers you a whiff. The smell is potent. A little goes a long way, she warns cheerfully. Add it to stew or bread, and even a poor man eats like a senator. You take a polite step back, but thank her for the demonstration. She grins knowingly. Everyone reacts the same way the first time. A few stalls down, another merchant is sprinkling crushed herbs over his fish, claiming it keeps away flies and bad luck. He swears by it, though historians still debate whether such mixtures actually helped preserve fish or were just good marketing. Either way, he says, it smells better than most politicians. By midday, the noise swells to its peak. Buyers shouting, gulls shrieking overhead, fishmongers pounding cleavers through bone. It should feel chaotic, but it doesn't. It's rhythm. It's life orchestrated into sound. Eventually, though, you begin to drift away from the fountain. Behind you, the shouts soften into background murmur. The Agora's pulse steady and content. The breeze shifts again, carrying away the smell of the sea and replacing it with the dusty sweetness of figs and honey from stalls farther up the hill. You glance back once more. The fishermen are still at it, laughing, chopping, shouting. The cat has finally claimed a scrap of mackerel and is now purring in lazy triumph. You take one last look at the fountain, sunlight catching the spray like fragments of glass, and feel the faint coolness of it on your skin. You imagine all the lives that have passed here, all the mornings that began with this same scent of salt and hope. The market hums on, eternal and ordinary, and you continue your slow walk through it, carrying the memory of the sea with you like a faint shimmer in the back of your mind. Somewhere behind you, the fishmongers shout another sale, their voices fading like waves against marble. You follow the curve of the market away from the clamor of scales and shouting fishmongers, and the sound fades as though someone's turned down the volume of the city. What replaces it is a different kind of noise, quieter, but no less intense. The murmur of voices layered with pauses, laughter, and the soft scrape of sandals on stone. You know you've reached the philosopher's corner. It's not officially marked, of course. There's no marble sign proclaiming, "Welcome to deep thoughts and half-empty wine cups." But you can feel it, the shift in atmosphere, the rhythm of questions floating like pigeons overhead. A cluster of men gather beneath a shaded portico near the Stoa of Attalos. Some sit cross-legged, others lean on pillars or rest their elbows on amphorae. A few scribble notes on wax tablets, though most simply talk or argue, depending on how you define conversation. You settle nearby, careful not to trip over a stray scroll. The marble is warm under you, the air humming with the scent of olives and ink. Someone's frying chickpeas in oil a few stalls away, and the occasional whiff of smoke drifts lazily through the debate. A thin man in a gray cloak gestures animatedly with a fig in one hand. Virtue, he insists, is not what you do, but what you choose not to do when no one is watching. His companion, a stockier fellow with the expression of someone who's endured too many sermons, takes a long sip of watered wine and replies dryly, "That's convenient. I suppose forgetting to pay my fishmonger is a test of virtue, then?" A ripple of laughter moves through the group. Even the fig philosopher smiles. You realize that this, too, is a marketplace, but instead of goods, they trade in ideas. Questions are the currency. Wit is the bargaining chip. Athens has more thinkers per square foot than any city in the ancient world, and most of them seem to have gathered right here, right now, in sandals and slightly mismatched togas. You drift closer and catch snippets of conversations. If the soul is eternal, why does mine dislike mornings? Because you drink like a symposium every night, Cleon. And yet I'm still wiser than you, which proves my point. A few feet away, a small group of students gather around a balding teacher with a calm voice. He speaks not loudly, but clearly enough that the others hush to listen. Wisdom, he says, is knowing how little we know and how much we assume. You glance at him. He doesn't announce his name, but his style is familiar. The quiet questioning, the gentle irony. Could he be a follower of Socrates, or perhaps one of his imitators, of which there are many? The man continues, asking his students why they think the gods tolerate human folly. One young man ventures because they find it entertaining. The teacher smiles faintly. Then the gods must laugh often. A woman passes nearby with a basket of figs. One of the younger students turns to watch her go, visibly distracted. The teacher notices. "You see," he says, "desire distracts us from truth." The youth blushes. "But without desire," he replies, "would we seek truth at all?" The teacher pauses, considering, and for a moment you sense that this small, sunlit corner of the market might be shaping an idea that will ripple through centuries. A few paces away, a stoic philosopher sits apart from the chatter, his posture perfect, his face a study in calm. You've heard of these Stoics, followers of Zeno, who taught that peace comes from aligning oneself with nature and reason. He sits with eyes half closed, unfazed by flies, laughter, or the occasional juggler passing by. You watch as a curious child approaches him, holding out a small pebble. "Is this good or bad?" the boy asks. The Stoic opens one eye. "It's neither," he says softly. "It simply is." The boy frowns, unsatisfied, and runs off to find a less ambiguous playmate. Nearby, a cynic philosopher, barefoot, wild-haired, and radiating the distinct energy of someone who hasn't paid rent in a while, heckles the crowd. "You all talk about virtue," he shouts, "but who among you would give away your sandals to a beggar?" He kicks his own foot in demonstration. "Look, no sandals, no problem." A vendor tosses him a date pit in mock applause. You notice how everyone tolerates him. Some laugh, some roll their eyes, but no one silences him. In Athens, even insults are part of public debate. It's a culture that feeds on dialogue, even when it smells faintly of goat. As you listen, a thought surfaces. How unusual it is that this city makes philosophy not an ivory tower pursuit, but a street performance. Here, ideas belong to everyone: merchants, servants, housewives, and the occasional passing tourist from the future. One man with bright eyes and a trimmed beard starts explaining something about the movement of the heavens. The earth, he says confidently, is not flat, but curved, like an orange, round and spinning. His companions groan. "You're dreamin', Democritus," one says. "If we were spinning, we'd fall off." "Ah," replies Democritus, "but we're held down by nature herself." Historians still argue whether such ideas were truly spoken aloud in the Agora or quietly scribbled in private, but imagining it here feels right. A gust of wind stirs the dust, lifting a few fig leaves from someone's snack. One philosopher sneezes mid-sentence, prompting his companion to declare, "Proof that the gods disapprove of your argument." The sneezer glares, and everyone laughs again. You lean back against a pillar and close your eyes for a moment. The hum of debate becomes a lullaby of syllables and laughter. You imagine Socrates himself once stood somewhere near this very spot, barefoot and patient, asking the same simple questions that still have no answers. "Tell me," says a young man nearby, "if we cannot see truth, how can we know it's real?" His teacher replies, "The same way you know wind exists by its effects." The student nods slowly, chewing on the thought like a difficult olive pit. The sun has climbed high now, casting sharp light across the colonnade. The philosophers shift into the shade, their cloaks forming little islands of color amid the marble. Someone begins playing a flute softly, the notes threading through the words like smoke through air. You catch the faint scent of wine again. Someone's refilled their cup. "Moderation," one declares, raising it in a toast, "is knowing when to stop before you stop knowing." The group applauds, though no one stops drinking. A few feet away, a young scribe scratches lines into a wax tablet, perhaps recording the day's debates. You wonder if those notes will someday become fragments of philosophy read by scholars centuries later, dissected and debated in their own turn. Athens has a way of preserving not just marble and myth, but the very texture of thought. As the hour drifts on, the crowd begins to thin. Merchants pack up, children tug at their parents' robes, and even the philosophers start losing momentum. Discussions fade into small talk about lunch, weather, and whether anyone's seen a decent papyrus dealer lately. One old man, stooped but bright-eyed, catches your gaze. "You've listened long," he says. "What have you learned?" You pause, unsure how to answer. "That," he says gently, "is the beginning of wisdom." Then he turns back toward the fountain, where the last traces of laughter mix with the whisper of water. You rise, stretch, and take one last look at the philosopher's corner. Scrolls tucked away, cups empty, yet the air still hums faintly with questions. Questions that will echo long after the voices are gone. You walk on, back into the sunlight, the hum of the Agora swelling around you again. Behind you, a final shout rings out. "But what is justice, really?" Followed by a groan from someone who clearly needs a nap. You smile to yourself. In Athens, it seems even exhaustion is philosophical. The murmur of debate trails you like a breeze, soft and endless, carrying the weight of thoughts too big to fade. The hum of debate fades behind you as you drift back into the wider stream of the Agora. The voices of philosophers give way to another kind of conversation, quieter, more practical, yet no less alive. The women and servants of Athens move here like the market's hidden rhythm, weaving through the crowd with the practiced grace of those who keep the city breathing while others take the credit. At first, you might miss them. Their voices are soft beneath the clatter of amphorae and the shouts of merchants. But if you listen closely, you'll hear the real pulse of Athens. The shuffle of sandals, the rustle of baskets, the faint creak of leather straps under the weight of daily labor. You pass a woman balancing a clay jar on her shoulder, her himation neatly pinned, her steps slow but sure. She pauses to haggle over a handful of figs, her tone steady, confident. She's done this dance countless times. Beside her stands a young servant boy, barely 12, clutching a small purse and glancing nervously at every hand that reaches too close. You smile. He's learning early that honesty and opportunity walk a thin line in any market. In classical Athens, most women of respectable households didn't own stalls or sell wares openly. At least, that's what the laws and philosophers claimed. But the Agora doesn't answer to theory. Here, women move with purpose. Some are widows managing small trades, others wives sent to fetch oil or thread, others still foreign-born medics who sell herbs, incense, or woven cloth. They make the exchanges that keep homes running, temples stocked, and bellies fed. You stop near a stall draped with dyed fabrics, shades of indigo, saffron, and rose. The woman tending it, her hair wrapped in linen, greets you warmly. "Fine wool from Elis," she says, running her fingers over a bolt of deep blue cloth. "Soft enough for a goddess, or a husband who wants to impress one." Her tone carries that practiced mix of charm and irony you've heard all morning. You ask how she manages such colors, and she explains with pride. "Boil the cloth with murex shells, purple as a sunset. Though," she adds with a wink, "the smell could wake Hades himself." You laugh. She isn't exaggerating. The purple dye that made kings fashionable came from crushed sea snails, and even a few ounces could scent the air for miles. As she speaks, a girl of perhaps 15 darts forward to deliver a basket of wool to her mother's stall. She glances at you, curious but wary. "My daughter," the woman says, "learns the trade early. Men debate in the stoas, but we make sure they're properly dressed for it." She's not wrong. You think of the countless tunics, cloaks, and sandals that pass through these hands, the quiet labor that keeps Athenian pride polished and perfumed. A little farther along, the air grows thick with spices and smoke. A line of servants waits at a cook's stall, holding small clay bowls. The cook ladles out barley stew and roasted chickpeas, sometimes slipping an extra olive to those who look particularly tired. You notice how many of the servants carry tokens, small bits of stamped clay that act as meal allowances from their households. Payment comes not from their own pockets, but from the ones they serve. You linger beside them. A young woman in a faded tunic murmurs that she works in a house near the Acropolis, scrubbing floors of marble so white it's like polishing lightning. Her hands are red from lye, but her voice is calm. "The lady I serve," she says, "likes her bread soft and her gossip softer. I listen more than I speak." She shrugs. "It's safer that way." You can hear the unspoken hierarchy in every syllable. The citizens debate freedom while their servants carry it home in baskets. Yet there's no bitterness in her tone, only weary acceptance. Athens is a city of contradictions. Democracy built on dependence, philosophy rising from calloused hands. Nearby, a group of slave porters passes, bent under the weight of amphoras stacked like oversized grapes. Their feet slap rhythmically against the stone, and though no one looks twice, their presence is unmistakable. One trips slightly, catching the jar before it cracks. He exhales, half in relief, half in resignation. You wonder how many years of his life are bound up in those ropes and jars. You recall that historians still argue whether Athens truly saw slavery as moral blindness or simple necessity. Some philosophers spoke against cruelty, but few questioned the system itself. Freedom, it seems, was a word with conditions. A breeze sweeps through the Agora, lifting the scent of incense and myrrh. You turn toward a small table where a foreign woman, perhaps from Egypt or the Levant, sells cones of fragrant resin and tiny bottles of perfume oil. Her accent lilts through Greek like music. "For the temples," she says, holding up a vial of amber liquid, "or for the home altar, if you wish the gods to notice you." The perfume is heady and sweet. She smiles when you lean closer. "You see, the men debate what virtue smells like. I sell them something that at least gets them noticed." You laugh softly, and she dips a fingertip into the oil, dabbing it on your wrist. The scent blooms. Honey, cedar, smoke. "Imported?" you ask. "From beyond the islands," she says. "But mixed here. Everything becomes Athenian eventually." That line lingers in your mind as you wander on. Athens thrives not just on its citizens, but on its outsiders, the medics, traders, and servants who form the invisible infrastructure beneath the marble. Without them, the city's brilliance would flicker and fade like an unattended lamp. At the edge of the market, a few women gather near a small shrine dedicated to Hestia, goddess of the hearth. They place offerings, a bit of grain, a few drops of oil, and whisper prayers for safety, health, maybe patience for their husbands' endless debates. You watch quietly, feeling how calm the ritual seems compared to the noise beyond. One woman lights a tiny clay lamp and says softly, "May our homes burn bright, even when the city forgets us." The flame wavers, steadying itself against the wind. You find yourself holding your breath, unwilling to disturb it. As you move on, the crowd thickens again. A merchant calls out prices for onions. A boy chases a runaway chicken. A servant girl tries not to laugh as she scoops it up. Life here doesn't pause. It flows like a river around every obstacle. You pass a group of women gathered around a potter's stall, admiring new cups painted with scenes of daily life. A shepherd, a mother at her loom, a girl feeding a dove. "I like this one," says one woman, tracing a fingertip along the clay. "At least it remembers us." The potter smiles faintly, but says nothing. That quiet observation stays with you. The awareness that in the grand stories of Athens, the names of women and servants rarely survive. Yet here they are, immortalized in art, etched into the pottery that will outlast empires. Somewhere nearby, laughter erupts again. Probably the same philosophers still debating whether the gods care about human affairs. You can almost hear them through the crowd. The women don't look up. They've heard it all before. One adjusts her shawl and says dryly, "If the gods cared, they'd do the shopping themselves." The others chuckle softly and continue weighing onions. As the sun leans westward, shadows stretch long between the stalls. Servants hurry homeward, balancing jars and baskets. Women tuck purchases into folds of fabric. The Agora begins to settle, though its heartbeat continues, steady, unbroken, eternal. You pause one last time at the fountain, where a young servant rinses her hands. The water gleams gold in the fading light. You ask if she's tired. She smiles faintly. "Always," she says, "but it's a good tired, the kind that earns sleep." You nod, and for a moment, the city feels almost quiet, a brief harmony between noise and peace. Around you, Athens exhales, merchants packing, women laughing, servants steadying their loads. Ordinary lives, woven into the grandeur of marble and myth. You take one last look at them, the unrecorded souls who carry the weight of the city on their shoulders, and then step onward, the whisper of sandals fading behind you. Some histories are written on scrolls, others in footprints across worn stone. As you drift further from the fountain and the quiet rhythm of servants and women, the Agora transforms once again. The air grows heavier, layered with the sense of fire, bread, roasted meat, and something faintly sweet, the invisible signature of a city alive and awake. You've entered the baker's and butcher's quarter, where work is noisy, smells are bold, and the pulse of daily life beats strongest. The first thing that hits you is the smell, warm, yeasty, slightly nutty, mixed with the sharper tang of iron and fresh blood. You pause to inhale, feeling your stomach betray your calm curiosity. A baker lifts a tray of flatbreads from the oven, steam curling like smoke from a tiny chimney. He slides them onto a wicker basket and flips one toward a customer, who catches it effortlessly. "Morning's first bread is for the city," he says, wiping flour from his hands. "The rest goes to whoever pays." There's a soft joke in his voice, a wink toward the universe that keeps Athens moving. Someone has to keep people fed. You watch as he sprinkles sesame seeds across the golden surface, each one a tiny promise of flavor. Nearby, a group of women watch hungrily, clutching clay bowls for early breakfast. The baker calls out prices and flavors with rhythmic precision, like a singer conducting an orchestra of hunger. The crowd leans in, some sniffing the bread before deciding which one to buy, others bargaining with quiet insistence. You notice the ovens, large, domed structures carved from clay, lined with stone. Fire glows inside, consuming wood and barley husks. A faint crackle accompanies the aroma. It reminds you how much work goes unseen. The careful tending of the flame, the precise timing of dough kneading, the vigilance against burned loaves. One mistake and a morning's work could become blackened ash. Just beyond the ovens, the butcher stalls begin. The air changes here. A richer, heavier scent of iron, meat, and smoke from small grills. A man with a leather apron hacks at a slab of pork with methodical precision, his cleaver rising and falling like a metronome. Behind him, a young boy sorts cuts into baskets, his hands red but steady. "You know," the butcher says, wiping sweat from his brow, "there are easier ways to live. But then, where would the city's stew be?" His companion laughs, and the boy nods solemnly, as if understanding the philosophy of cooking before he understands philosophy itself. Historians still argue whether Athenian butchers ever worked under formal guilds or mostly learned by apprenticeship. But standing here, you can see the methodical care, the clean slices, the neatly stacked meat, the attention to smell and texture that keeps families fed day after day. At a nearby stall, a woman sells cheese and salted meat. Small wheels of goat cheese gleam white beneath the sun, dusted with herbs. She gestures at the cuts of salted pork and mutton, describing their origins. "The hills near Hymettus, blessed by the sun and the goats," she says. You taste it, you feel the slope underfoot. You take a sample, creamy, slightly tangy, fragrant with time, and suddenly the city feels even closer, grounded in taste and toil. Between the bakers and butchers, a small grill smokes gently, and a man turns skewers of seasoned fish and meat over hot coals. He offers a passing customer a piece of lamb, slightly charred at the edges. The customer bites and closes his eyes, savoring the moment as if the entire morning of work has distilled into that single smoky flavor. You can almost understand why some Athenians would claim that food itself is a path to divine pleasure. Children weave through the stalls, balancing small coins or carrying empty bowls for leftovers. Their laughter mingles with the rhythmic thump of cleavers and the hiss of bread pulled from the oven. You notice how the market teaches them early, how to weigh, to bargain, to observe human nature in all its flavors. A young woman carrying a basket of small loaves pauses, fanning the smoke from the grills. She whispers to a friend, "I swear the gods must have blessed bread, or we'd starve before the philosophers finished talking." The friend nods, and you chuckle softly. Athens may be full of debate, but life depends on bread, not argument. You glance at a small stall tucked in the corner, where a man sells herbs and spices for cooking: oregano, thyme, coriander seeds, and crushed saffron threads. He grinds a small bowl and lets the aroma float through the aisle. Flavor matters, he insists. Even the simplest meal deserves respect. You nod. In every bite, in every smell, the care of the city's people manifests quietly, like poetry written in daily gestures. A curious sight catches your eye. A small elderly dog waits patiently near the butcher's stall. Its eyes follow every motion, tail wagging faintly, hoping for a morsel. You suspect it's been here many mornings before you, a silent witness to the rhythm of work and hunger. One of the butchers tosses it a scrap, and the dog snaps it with quiet gratitude, retreating to the shade. Somewhere, a man shouts over the crowd, "Fresh liver, the only cure for a philosopher's headache!" Laughter follows. You notice how humor threads through every transaction, as essential as bread and salt. Even in labor, Athenians carve out space for levity. You wander deeper, noting the subtle choreography: bakers shifting trays, butchers rotating cuts, customers moving in measured patterns. Each stall is a small ecosystem. Workers exchange quick words, gestures, warnings, and encouragement. The market is alive with invisible coordination, a web of human motion honed over decades. A young apprentice trips over a fallen flour sack. The baker calls out, half annoyed, half amused, "Balance, boy! Even the gods stumble sometimes, but you should aim higher." The boy straightens, muttering apologies, and the baker chuckles, shaking his head. It strikes you that mistakes here are inevitable, but often absorbed into the rhythm rather than punished. Nearby, a small altar dedicated to Demeter is tucked against a wall, offerings of grain and small bread loaves left by passers-by. Someone whispers a prayer, "Keep our crops safe and our ovens warm." You pause, noticing how even amidst the chaos of daily trade, these quiet rituals persist, invisible threads of reverence woven into ordinary life. Historians still argue whether such public shrines truly influenced daily life or existed as mere tradition, but standing here, with hands busy and smells intense, the presence of the divine feels tangible. A whisper of something sacred hangs over the ordinary: a loaf of bread, a cut of meat, a shared meal. The sun climbs higher now, casting shadows across baskets of bread and cuts of meat. Merchants mop sweat from their brows and reset their stalls, preparing for the next wave of customers. You notice how every movement is practiced, almost ceremonial, each task flowing naturally into the next. You drift toward the edge of the quarter, taking in the smells, sights, and sounds one last time. Bread, meat, and herbs swirl together in a harmony as complex as the philosopher's arguments or the whispered prayers to Demeter. The Agora is alive, every corner stitched together by work, by care, and by simple human presence. The smell of smoke and yeast lingers on your clothes as you step onward. You realize that even as the market changes, from potters to olive merchants, from fishmongers to philosophers, one thing remains constant: the quiet heroism of labor, the way Athens feeds itself, one loaf, one cut, one carefully tended basket at a time. Life here is measured in small gestures, kneading, chopping, offering, a rhythm older than the sun, steady as a heartbeat. The scent of bread and roasting meat begins to fade as you leave the bustle of the bakers and butchers behind. In its place comes a subtler aroma: dry clay, stone dust, and the faint trace of resin. You've wandered into the artisan's quarter of the Agora, where the work is quieter, more deliberate, and every gesture seems to carry centuries of skill. Here, the city takes shape in the hands of those who mold, carve, and paint, transforming raw materials into objects both useful and beautiful. Your first stop is a pottery stall, where rows of amphorae, craters, and kylixes stand like silent sentinels. The potters are at work, hands coated in reddish clay, spinning the wheel with patient precision. One man shapes a tall amphora, the spinning motion hypnotic, while another trims the edges of a shallow bowl, eyes narrowed in concentration. You watch, mesmerized by the rhythm, each movement precise, almost musical, as though the clay responds to an invisible conductor. A young apprentice approaches, holding a small painted vase. "See this?" he says softly. "The black figure technique. My teacher says every line tells a story. The vase depicts a scene of a chariot race, horses straining, riders leaning forward, the crowd at the finish line barely visible. You lean closer and notice the fine details, muscles, folds of fabric, even the expressions of the spectators. The skill is staggering. The master potter notices your interest and smiles faintly. Clay is forgiving, but only if you respect it, he says. Push too hard and it cracks. Neglect it and it collapses. Patience is the secret, and a little humility. You nod, realizing that this philosophy extends beyond pottery into life itself. Nearby, a sculptor works on a marble relief, chiseling delicately, each tap precise and careful. The stone dust hangs in the sunlight, settling slowly onto the floor and your sandals. You watch as he transforms a rough block into a figure of Athena, shield raised, eyes calm but alert. You notice the subtle tension in her stance. The sculptor has captured motion frozen in stone, a paradox that fascinates you. He pauses to wipe sweat from his brow, and you ask about his tools. Simple, he replies. Chisels, hammers, patience, and perhaps a touch of the divine. The material tells you what it wants to be if you listen closely. You smile, remembering the baker and the fishmonger, all of them, in their own way, listening to materials, elements, and life itself. On a nearby table, small terracotta figurines are drying in the sun. You notice one depicting a woman playing a lyre, another of a man wrestling a goat, and a tiny figure of a child holding a bird. Someone explains that these are offerings for homes or shrines, tokens of devotion or good luck charms. Historians still argue whether such figurines were purely religious or also playful. Toys and charms often overlapped in ancient Athens. A woman approaches with a basket of painted tiles, each one depicting a different motif: waves, olive branches, lions, geometric patterns. Color matters, she says, brushing her fingers over a tile streaked with cinnabar red. Even a wall can tell a story. You admire the precision and vibrancy of the designs, thinking about how much time and care goes into objects that might be touched, admired, and eventually forgotten. You wander toward a sculptor of bronze figurines, a small yet intricate art. He melts the metal over charcoal and pours it carefully into molds. The molten glow reflects in his eyes as he works. A tiny statue of a warrior emerges, still warm, polished to a gleam. Bronze, he says proudly, holds the sun within it. You note the mixture of practicality and poetry. Bronze for durability, yet treated with reverence for its aesthetic qualities. Nearby, a small apprentice is learning to mix pigments for painted pottery. Red from hematite, black from fired clay, white from chalk. The colors are natural, grounded, and yet capable of infinite creativity. The master demonstrates subtle gradients, blending colors with soft brushes made of animal hair. Every stroke, he says, is a choice. Every choice, a story. You notice how the artisans interact. A shared glance, a brief word of advice, a nod of respect. Even in the competitive atmosphere of the Agora, there's a sense of community. The work is demanding, but collaboration and observation allow the city's beauty to flourish. A small crowd gathers near a sculptor polishing a marble mask, the features delicate, eyes hollowed for dramatic effect. The theater, he explains, demands exaggeration. The gods and the audience must see emotion even in the back row. You peer closer and notice the subtle curves that hint at a smile, yet the eyes suggest a quiet sadness, a paradox frozen forever in stone. As you move through the stalls, you spot a potter who mixes clay with crushed seashells, producing a slightly rough texture, perfect for functional jugs and coarse bowls. He laughs when you ask why. Not every vessel is meant to be admired. Some must endure the hands of sailors, cooks, and children. There's a practical poetry in that observation, and you marvel at the balance of beauty and utility in every object. A small child approaches, holding a chipped cup. "Will you fix it?" he asks. The master potter lifts it gently, inspecting the fracture. "Some things cannot return to their original state," he says softly, "but they can still serve." The child nods slowly, accepting the lesson with the patience of youth. You wander past a group of weavers and leather workers, their work quieter but no less skillful. A young woman traces intricate patterns on leather sandals, while another threads wool into fine belts. The air carries the faint scent of resin, tanned hide, and freshly woven fibers. Each piece a small miracle of craft, designed to last but also to delight. Someone near you is carving a small ivory plaque, delicately etching the likeness of a deer. You notice how careful he is with every line. A single mistake would be catastrophic. His hands shake slightly, but his focus is absolute. Historians still debate how ivory was sourced and traded in Athens, but here in this quarter, the material is handled with reverence, almost sacred attention. The sun leans toward the west, casting long shadows across tables of clay, stone, and metal. The artisans work steadily, their faces illuminated by the golden glow, their movements deliberate yet natural, a choreography honed by experience. You realize that every object around you carries the imprint of countless hours, centuries of accumulated knowledge, and the quiet pride of the maker. You take a moment to breathe it all in. The Agora is a living tapestry. Bakers knead, fishmongers slice, philosophers argue, and artisans create. Every hand, every gesture contributes to the city's rhythm, and in this quarter, the beat is slow, meticulous, and eternal. As you step forward, leaving the sculptors and potters behind, the smell of clay and resin lingers faintly, like a shadow of creativity following you through the stone streets. You sense that in Athens, even the quietest corners hum with life, and every object tells a story waiting for the attentive eye. Here, in dust and pigment, in clay and marble, the city leaves its fingerprints on eternity. The rhythm of artisans slowly fades as you leave the pottery and sculpture stalls behind. Ahead, the Agora takes on a different cadence, quieter, slower, almost reverent. You've entered the temples and sacred corners of the market, where the spiritual pulse of Athens mingles seamlessly with the practical hum of daily life. Here, the marble is polished by centuries of hands, not all human. Worn steps echo with devotion, curiosity, and the occasional clumsy tourist from some distant village. Your first step is toward a small shrine tucked against a sunlit colonnade. Its stone altar is simple. No gilded statues, no elaborate reliefs, yet it radiates a calm authority. Offerings of grain, wine, and tiny oil lamps sit carefully placed on its surface, some fresh, some blackened from yesterday's flame. You notice a faint residue of incense curling lazily in the air, the smoke catching the sunlight like a miniature cloud. A woman kneels nearby, adjusting a small clay bowl of olives. She murmurs a prayer to Hestia, goddess of the hearth. Her tone is quiet, almost whispered, yet her concentration is absolute. You sense that these prayers are not dramatic pleas for divine intervention, but simple affirmations. Keep the house warm, the bread baked, the family safe. In this city of brilliant thinkers and loud debates, such understated devotion persists like an undercurrent. Moving deeper, you pass a small temple dedicated to Athena, her protective presence carved in stern relief above the entrance. Statues and votive offerings crowd the interior, miniature shields, painted pottery, and small figurines. A priestess tends a low altar, sweeping dust and petals from its surface. She lifts a bronze oil lamp, letting it swing gently to illuminate a carved panel showing Athena and Poseidon contesting for the city. The soft flicker of light creates shadows that seem to animate the scene, as if the goddess herself is moving just slightly. You notice a young boy watching from the doorway, fascinated by the interplay of light and marble. The priestess smiles, gesturing for him to come closer. "Observe," she whispers, "and respect what these hands built." The gods notice small attention too. Historians still argue whether children were allowed to participate in temple rituals this openly, but it feels natural here. Athens folds learning, worship, and curiosity into one seamless experience. Nearby, a smaller shrine honors Dionysus, the god of wine and theater. A cluster of women leaves offerings of small jugs, some filled with watered wine, others with honey. The aroma is faint but sweet, mingling with the incense from other corners. One woman laughs softly as she adjusts her offering, muttering, "May he forgive us if the wine sours." The casual humor is striking. Worship in Athens often mixes reverence with gentle levity. A few steps away, a bronze statue of Apollo stands in a quiet alcove, bow in hand, eyes gazing toward the Acropolis. A man sits nearby, sketching on a wax tablet, capturing the contours of the figure with careful strokes. "Art and devotion," he murmurs to himself, "are twins, each born from the same hand." You watch as he works, appreciating how in Athens the divine and human coexist so closely that one informs the other effortlessly. You notice small votive plaques at the edges of other corners, fragments of daily life offered to the gods. Some depict ships sailing safely across the sea, others children playing, and a few odd whimsical items. A tiny clay cow with exaggerated features, perhaps intended to amuse or appease. Scholars still debate whether such quirky offerings were sacred, playful, or a combination of both. Standing there, it feels entirely plausible that they were all three. A priest approaches a small fire, adding a few drops of olive oil to the flame. The scent rises, thickening the air, and you breathe it in deeply. The ritual is small, almost imperceptible, yet it holds weight. Every flicker of flame, every rising curl of smoke is a silent testament to care, attention, and the acknowledgement of forces larger than oneself. You wander past altars dedicated to lesser-known deities, noticing how Athens accommodates even minor gods. There's a tiny shrine to Hermes tucked in a corner, offering protection for travelers and merchants. Another for Pan, guardian of flocks, where shepherds leave small tokens. And a cluster of stone blocks honoring the nymphs, scattered with small flowers and beads. You can almost hear faint whispers of gratitude woven into the air. A woman passes by, holding a small amphora of oil, pausing at the nymph's shrine. She tips the amphora, letting a few drops spill over the stones, murmuring, "For safe water and soft winds." The gesture is quick, unremarkable, yet somehow monumental in its quietness. You realize that in Athens, reverence often goes unnoticed by the masses, but it still shapes the city's rhythm. Near a corner of the Agora, a temple to Hephaestus commands attention with its robust Doric columns. You glance up at the frieze, where mythological scenes of craftsmanship and fire are carved in relief. A young blacksmith, apprenticed to a nearby forge, pauses to admire the work. His eyes trace each tool, each anvil, each hammer swing depicted in stone. He murmurs, "Even the gods respect effort." The sentiment is humbling. You notice how the artisans and priests often interact quietly. Clay bowls from the potter's stalls become temple offerings. Small bronze figurines are left on shrines. even the simplest baked loaf can be dedicated to a deity. The line between daily labor and sacred service blurs here, showing you that in Athens, work and worship are deeply intertwined. A gentle breeze shifts, carrying the faint sound of distant flutes and the laughter of children still lingering near the fountain. You watch as a small group of women lights tiny lamps at another shrine, the glow soft against the polished marble. One whispers, "May our homes be full of warmth and our hearts full of calm." Another nods, adjusting a tiny garland. Somewhere nearby, a philosopher mutters to his students about the gods' influence on human nature. A priestess smiles knowingly, adjusting her veil, and continues her duties. Historians still argue whether daily life was truly imbued with divine oversight, or if the gods served more as symbols of civic order. Yet here, in this corner of the Agora, faith feels tangible, tactile, almost inevitable. A young boy, perhaps no older than 8, holds a small figurine of a horse and tentatively places it at the base of a shrine. "For safe travel," he whispers. An older woman, maybe his mother, places a hand lightly on his shoulder. You watch them leave together, footsteps soft against the stone, leaving the offering behind like a small anchor of hope in the world. The sun leans lower, and shadows stretch across marble floors and stone altars. You take a deep breath, noticing how the light and smoke, incense and oil, prayer and devotion all blend into one harmonious whole. The Agora's sacred corners are not silent, nor are they separate from life. Instead, they coexist, threading the divine gently through the daily bustle of the city. As you prepare to move on, you glance back at the flickering lamps, the small piles of grain and oil, the carved marble faces of gods and heroes. It feels as though Athens itself is breathing quietly, a slow, rhythmic exhale that connects work, play, thought, and prayer into a single living organism. Here, devotion is neither loud nor spectacular. It is quiet, persistent, and woven seamlessly into the fabric of daily life. The air shifts before you even see them. A salty tang sneaks in from nowhere, blending with dust and olive oil, and you know exactly what's ahead. The fishmonger's quarter of the Agora has its own presence, noisy, pungent, alive. You follow the scent like a sea breeze guiding you through sun-bleached marble lanes until the chorus of gulls, merchants, and splashing water greets you in unison. There's a public fountain at the edge of the market, a semicircle of cool stone where women fill jars and children chase the spray. Around it, the fish stalls cluster like barnacles, each shaded by linen canopies that flap lazily in the morning wind. The marble underfoot is slick with meltwater. Somewhere, a fisherman is loudly insisting his octopus was still singing hymns to Poseidon this morning. You pause to take it all in. The metallic glint of scales, the slap of tails on wood, the endless bargaining. The sound alone could keep the sea awake. A heavy-set man with a bristly beard waves you over. "You look like someone who appreciates freshness," he bellows, then gestures proudly to a table spread with gleaming silver fish, their eyes clear as polished glass. "Caught at dawn near Piraeus," he says. "They practically leapt into the net to escape the philosophers." You can't help smiling. He chuckles, pleased at his own joke. He holds up a small red mullet, its scales shimmering like tiny rubies. "This one," he says, "was the favorite of the rich. They like to watch it change color before it dies." He shakes his head. "Too much money makes people strange, eh?" That, you recall, is true. Roman writers later recorded this very custom. Wealthy Athenians paying for exotic fish just to admire their fading hues before the cook prepared them. You quietly wonder if that's more disturbing or just morbidly poetic. The fishmonger tosses the mullet back into the crushed ice. Now, if you want something honest, he says, try the sardines. Cheap, tasty, and they don't complain about philosophy. He scoops a few into a woven basket. You fry these in olive oil, maybe a pinch of thyme. That's happiness right there. As he speaks, a woman beside him calls out prices in a practiced rhythm, voice rising and falling like the tide. Tuna fish, fresh cuttlefish, 2 drachmas for a fine mackerel. Her sleeves are rolled high, and she works with swift precision, gutting fish and wrapping them in fig leaves for her customers. A cat sits on a nearby barrel, pretending not to care, its tail flicking every time a piece of fish lands too close. You notice how organized the chaos actually is. Each stall specializes, one in shellfish, another in salted eels, another in the small, oily fish used for sauces. Amphora of brine glisten in the shade, filled with pickled anchovies bound for homes across Athens. See that one? The bearded man says, pointing to a large tuna laid out on a slab. That's worth more than a philosopher's honesty, he winks, which is saying something. You laugh again, and he seems to appreciate the company. He tells you that most of the fish come from the port of Piraeus, just a few miles away, where boats unload their catches at dawn. The fastest sellers rush here immediately, hoping to sell their haul before the midday sun turns it into a sculpture. Speed, he says, is the soul of good fish. He offers you a thin slice of something smoked, salty, savory, still soft. Try this, he says. We preserve them with salt from Hymettus Hill. Makes the flavor dance. The taste is strong and earthy, the sea condensed into a single bite. As you eat, he gestures to a small shrine tucked beside the fountain, a stone relief showing a dolphin leaping beside a trident. Someone has placed a few fish bones and sprigs of thyme at its base. That's for Poseidon and the Nereids, he explains. We give thanks, and sometimes apologies, he grins. The sea feeds us, but she also keeps score. You glance toward the water glittering in the fountain. Children are playing, splashing their feet, while a woman rinses a basket of clams. The scene feels timeless, an eternal moment of ordinary life preserved in motion. You can almost hear the hum of centuries beneath the chatter. Near the edge of the fountain, an old man with a weathered face is carefully cleaning fishing nets. He hums softly, a melody that sounds like a lullaby to the sea. You crouch near him and ask if he's a fisherman. Was, he says, before my back decided it preferred land. He smiles faintly. Now I mend nets for those who still dance with Poseidon. He tells you a story, how years ago he once caught a fish with strange markings that resembled letters. The priest said it was an omen. Historians still argue whether that was divine writing or just a fisherman's tall tale, he says, eyes twinkling. But me, I sold it for a good price either way. You chuckle, and he nods toward the market. These stalls, he says, have seen every kind of soul. The honest, the cunning, the hungry, the curious. You don't come here just for food. You come here to feel alive. You thank him and stand, stretching. The air is thick now with heat and the smell of salt and smoke. Someone is grilling small fish over charcoal. The crackle of oil mingles with laughter and gossip. A group of boys dart between the stalls, shouting about a monster fish that supposedly escaped a basket, though the monster turns out to be a slippery eel making a dramatic break for freedom. It slides across the stones, pursued by a trail of laughter. At the far edge, a woman sells salted fish paste packed in small clay jars, garos, the ancestor of Roman garum. She offers you a whiff. The smell is potent. A little goes a long way, she warns cheerfully. Add it to stew or bread, and even a poor man eats like a senator. You take a polite step back, but thank her for the demonstration. She grins knowingly. Everyone reacts the same way the first time. A few stalls down, another merchant is sprinkling crushed herbs over his fish, claiming it keeps away flies and bad luck. He swears by it, though historians still debate whether such mixtures actually help preserve fish or were just good marketing. Either way, he says, it smells better than most politicians. By midday, the noise swells to its peak. Buyers shouting, gulls shrieking overhead, fishmongers pounding cleavers through bone. It should feel chaotic, but it doesn't. It's rhythm. It's life orchestrated into sound. Eventually, though, you begin to drift away from the fountain. Behind you, the shouts soften into background murmur. The Agora's pulse steady and content. The breeze shifts again, carrying away the smell of the sea and replacing it with the dusty sweetness of figs and honey from stalls farther up the hill. You glance back once more. The fishermen are still at it, laughing, chopping, shouting. The cat has finally claimed a scrap of mackerel and is now purring in lazy triumph. You take one last look at the fountain, sunlight catching the spray like fragments of glass, and feel the faint coolness of it on your skin. You imagine all the lives that have passed here, all the mornings that began with this same scent of salt and hope. The market hums on, eternal and ordinary, and you continue your slow walk through it, carrying the memory of the sea with you like a faint shimmer in the back of your mind. Somewhere behind you, the fishmongers shout another sale, their voices fading like waves against marble. Leaving the performers and the gentle echo of music behind, you drift toward the food and drink quarter, where the Agora transforms again. Here, the pulse of Athens is carried not only by hands and voices, but by taste, aroma, and the liquid gold that flows through nearly every meal, olive oil. The scent of freshly pressed olives mingles with the rich tang of wine, and for a moment, you feel as if you are inhaling the very essence of the city itself. You first pass a stall overflowing with amphorae of oil, the golden liquid glinting in the sunlight. The merchant greets you warmly, tipping a small cup for you to taste. It is smooth, slightly peppery, with the subtle fragrance of wild thyme. "First cold press," he says proudly. "The gods themselves would approve, or at least your stomach would." You sip, savoring the depth of flavor, and can't help but marvel at how central this simple product is to daily life. Olive oil is not just food. It is medicine, fuel, and ritual offering. Nearby, a line of wine merchants waits, each with clay amphorae labeled with origin: Chios, Naxos, Lesbos. You watch a man pour a small sample into a shallow cup. The color is deep amber, the bouquet faintly sweet, earthy, and complex. Drink lightly, he advises, or your philosophy may turn into foolishness before lunch. You smile at the gentle humor. Wine here is more than indulgence. It's culture, negotiation, and conversation distilled into liquid form. A young woman approaches with a basket of olives, a mix of green and black, glossy with brine. She offers a sample, plump, salty, slightly bitter. "The bitter ones sharpen the mind," she jokes softly. You try one and almost wince at the concentrated flavor, but then it settles, leaving a complex, satisfying note. Historians still argue whether Athenians preferred their olives fully ripe, brined, or pressed into oil. But here in the market, every form has its place and fanatics for each. You move toward a small table where a man sells honey and sweet preserves. Glass jars glint in the sun, golden like captured sunlight. He lifts a small spoon and offers a taste. Thick, syrupy, floral. "For the morning porridge, for cakes, for the gods' offerings," he says. Even a few drops transform ordinary bread into something celebratory. You taste it and imagine the care of harvesting, boiling, and storing the honey, a labor that preserves sweetness against time itself. Nearby, a small stall is devoted to vinegar, herbs, and condiments. Dried oregano, crushed coriander seeds, and faintly aromatic thyme are displayed in shallow bowls. A young apprentice crushes a few olives into a paste, demonstrating the process of making a simple tapenade-like mixture. You watch and realize how every flavor is deliberate, a careful balance between necessity and pleasure. At another table, cheese wheels glimmer in the sun, some soft and fresh, others firm and aged, rubbed with herbs and salt. A boy lifts a wedge of hard cheese and hands it to a customer. "From goats grazing the hills of Hymettus," he says. The flavor is tangy, complex, and earthy, a product of landscape and care. You notice how much the city relies on these small, artisanal foods, grown and tended by people who often remain anonymous in the grand sweep of history. You pause at a wine tasting demonstration, where a man shows the proper technique. Swirl, sniff, sip. The first sip, he says, is for your tongue, the second for your mind, the third for your conversation. A small crowd nods knowingly, murmuring their appreciation. The ritual feels playful, yet purposeful, a reminder that even simple pleasure can carry depth. A small group of women passes, carrying baskets of figs, dates, and dried fruits. Their chatter is low, rhythmic, punctuated by laughter. One says, "A sweet bite keeps philosophers humble." Another adds, "and students quiet." You chuckle quietly. The humor, understated but omnipresent, continues to color the city's experience. You notice a man grinding barley for porridge, the coarse grains falling steadily into a clay bowl. The rhythmic motion is soothing, almost meditative, and you watch for a few moments, captivated by the simplicity and precision. Every ingredient in the Agora has its story, its lineage. The olives pressed from sun-baked hills, the honey gathered by careful hands, the grapes fermented under watchful eyes. Each cup, each morsel is a testament to craft, patience, and care. Somewhere nearby, a group of foreign traders demonstrates wine from the islands, a slightly different flavor profile, sharper, fruitier, with hints of brine. You taste a small sample and marvel at how diverse even a single commodity can be, how the Agora becomes a crossroads of not just goods, but culture and geography. Historians still argue whether Athens truly appreciated these nuances, or whether novelty alone drove curiosity. But standing here, it's clear that the city thrives on both. You wander past a stall offering garlands and small gifts, often used as accompaniments to meals or religious offerings. A young girl delicately threads small flowers together while humming a tune. You watch, fascinated, as the garlands form loops of color and fragrance. They will decorate tables, altars, and doorways, small gestures that lift ordinary experiences into ritual, art, and celebration. A baker nearby slides a tray of small honey cakes toward customers. Children eagerly reach for them, their fingers sticky with golden sweetness. You notice the careful balance of sugar, flour, and flavor, marveling at the skill involved in creating something both simple and delightful. Even here, the labor of artisans and cooks connects deeply with the life of the city. You pause to watch a merchant demonstrating olive oil for lighting lamps, pouring a small amount into a lamp, lighting it, and observing the steady flame. Athenian homes rely on this more than wisdom, he jokes. The crowd laughs softly. You realize that even humor intertwines with education and trade, lessons delivered lightly, like a drop of oil seeping into a vessel. As the sun leans westward, the stalls begin to slow. Merchants exchange soft words, packaging the remaining olives, oil, and wine for storage or transport. Children weave through the crowd, lingering for one last taste of honey or one final glance at the colorful jars. The Agora, so vibrant with commerce and labor, prepares for a pause, a brief breath before nightfall. You take a deep breath, inhaling the mingled scents of olive oil, wine, herbs, and honey. For a moment, you feel connected not only to the marketplace, but to the city itself. Athens distilled into flavor, aroma, and ritual. Each sip, each bite, each gesture of tasting is a small narrative, a microcosm of culture, care, and continuity. In Athens, taste is memory, labor, and devotion, carried in each drop of oil, each swirl of wine, each sweet bite of honey. Leaving the rich scents of olive oil and honey behind, you drift toward the quieter, more contemplative end of the Agora. Here, the bustle softens, giving way to a gentle hum of thought and debate, the kind that has defined Athens for generations. Philosophers gather beneath stoas, their robes flowing in the afternoon breeze, voices calm but insistent, inviting any who linger to pause, listen, and perhaps participate. You notice a small circle forming near a marble column. A philosopher of moderate age, his hair streaked with gray, gestures toward his students while explaining the virtues of moderation. His voice is measured, almost musical, rising and falling in a cadence that keeps your attention despite the distant clatter of merchants and the occasional laughter of children. One must consider the self, he says, but also the city, for they are intertwined like the threads of a tapestry. A young man leans forward, asking a pointed question about the nature of justice. The philosopher tilts his head, considering, then replies with a gentle smile. Historians still argue whether justice exists as a universal truth or emerges from the agreements of men. But we may discover its shape only in our practice, not in our words alone. You pause, imagining justice as a living thread, woven into daily life rather than a distant ideal. Nearby, another circle discusses ethics and the soul, the debate soft yet persistent. A student traces patterns in the dust with a stick as his mentor speaks, illustrating the balance between desire and reason. You notice how the philosophers do not shout to be heard. Their authority comes not from volume, but from precision and patience, from a rhythm that draws listeners into thought rather than forcing them. A woman passes with a basket of figs, glancing briefly at the debate. She mutters under her breath, "Philosophy is like honey, sweet, but best in moderation." Her companion chuckles, and you catch the remark, thinking it perfectly captures the understated humor that threads through the Agora. Even the weightiest discussion is softened by everyday observation. A young boy, perhaps 8 or 9, sits cross-legged on a worn stone, imitating the gestures of a philosopher. His expression is serious, but there is a flicker of playfulness in his eyes. He whispers a question to no one in particular. Do the gods listen to our questions too? Nearby, a teacher smiles and replies quietly, "Only if your intention is honest." The exchange is fleeting, yet it captures the intimacy of learning in the Agora. Knowledge passed gently, almost imperceptibly. You drift past a stoa lined with columns, where philosophers debate mathematics and logic. One holds a small abacus, demonstrating ratios of land, coin, or grain, while another sketches geometric shapes in the dust. Their discussion is animated, yet calm, bridging the practical and abstract. You marvel at how these conversations, though centuries removed from commerce, are still deeply embedded in the life of the city. A passerby asks about rhetoric, and the philosophers nod, discussing the power of persuasion in public life. Even a simple speech, one says, must honor truth, else it becomes a melody without meaning. The words hang in the air, faint but resonant, as if Athens itself listens to the conversation. You notice a senior philosopher seated under a plane tree, his voice carrying a gentle cadence that draws attention without effort. He speaks of moderation in consumption, moderation in action, moderation in thought. The surrounding students nod slowly, absorbing his words like water through fabric. You can see why these teachings endure. They are practical, humane, and intimate with life, even as they flirt with the abstract. A young woman pauses near the stoas, carrying small jars of oil and honey. She listens quietly, then whispers to her companion. They speak like wind over the olive trees, gentle but moving everything in its path. You think about the image, realizing how even casual observations by ordinary citizens add texture to the intellectual life of the city. You wander past a small debate about ethics in trade. One philosopher argues that honesty in markets benefits the soul. Another counters that pragmatism must sometimes outweigh principle. The conversation is calm, almost a dance of words. Historians still argue how often such philosophical discussions influenced everyday decisions, but standing here, watching attentive faces and careful gestures, you can see that the lessons seep into daily life as subtly as sunlight through colonnades. Nearby, a poet-philosopher recites verses about civic duty and human virtue, blending artistry with reflection. The rhythm of his words complements the ambient sounds of the market, sandals clacking, merchants haggling, children laughing. It is a reminder that Athens values not only reason, but also beauty, that thought and expression are intertwined. A group of students gathers near a low fountain, discussing whether happiness is achieved through virtue, wealth, or leisure. Their conversation is animated but never heated, as if the city itself demands civility in debate. One student pauses to scoop water into a cup, sipping slowly. Perhaps, he says, the answer lies in the pause, not the argument. You nod silently, appreciating the blend of practical life with abstract thought. A young boy approaches a philosopher with a simple question. If I act kindly, does it matter if the city notices? The philosopher smiles gently. Kindness, he replies, is its own reward. Yet when the city notices, it strengthens the fabric that binds us all. You watch the boy nod, understanding that the lessons of Athens are often experienced quietly, absorbed through small moments rather than loud proclamations. You drift toward the edge of the stoas, noticing the interplay of sound and silence. Debates continue, but they do not overpower the ambient murmur of the Agora. Sandals on stone, distant laughter, soft voices exchanging pleasantries. Philosophers speak, but they speak within a living city, not apart from it. Their words rise and fall, carried along currents of commerce, labor, and daily necessity. A small group observes a sculpture of Athena nearby, discussing whether virtue can be represented visually or only understood through discourse. Historians still argue whether such public intellectual life truly influenced the majority of citizens or remained the province of an elite few. But standing here, listening, you sense that even a casual passerby absorbs these debates in subtle ways. The sun leans westward, casting long shadows across the columns and the scattered students. You pause and breathe deeply, absorbing the gentle hum of the Agora's intellect. Merchants pack away goods, children scamper toward home, and the faint scent of olive oil lingers, mingling with the soft echoes of argument and laughter. The city is alive not only in movement, smell, and taste, but in thought, measured, patient, and persistent. You take one last look at the philosophers and students, their gestures fluid, voices calm, minds alive. You realize that Athens, at its heart, thrives on inquiry, discussion, and gentle reflection, a living lesson in patience, civility, and curiosity. Even as the day wanes, the Agora remains a classroom without walls, a stage without curtains, a space where the city itself teaches by example. Here, thought moves quietly through stone and sunlight, through argument and laughter, shaping the city as much as any hand or hammer. As the sun tilts toward the horizon, the Agora shifts once more. The vibrant colors of merchant stalls soften under the golden light. The bustling sounds of commerce and laughter mellow into a gentle hum, and the city seems to exhale after a long, productive day. You wander slowly through the now quieter streets, taking in the evening calm that settles over Athens. The vendors are packing away their goods, carefully stacking amphorae of oil and wine, returning olives and figs to baskets, brushing dust off coins and ledgers. A baker lifts the last tray of loaves from a cooling oven, the smell of warm bread lingering faintly in the air. He nods to a customer who lingers for one last bite before the evening meal. You watch, noting how the rhythm of the day flows toward closure. Labor winding down, people moving toward home, and the city's heartbeat softening but never ceasing. In the open square, the children who had danced, played, and followed musicians now wander home, their voices softer, the clatter of sandals on stone subdued. One small boy pauses near a fountain, gazing at the water as it reflects the sun's fading light. He tosses a small pebble, and the gentle ripples mirror the subtle changes in the Agora, energy dispersing, transitioning, preparing for night. The artisans are finishing their work as well. The potters clean their wheels, the sculptors brush marble dust from their tools, and the painters of clay and bronze arrange their wares for another day. Even in winding down, their movements are careful and deliberate, a final flourish of attention that honors both craft and the passing hours. Historians still debate how much artisans observed strict schedules versus following the sun's natural arc, but watching them now, it seems entirely natural that the day concludes with measured, mindful gestures. You pause near a shrine to Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, where a small lamp flickers gently. A woman kneels quietly, pouring a few drops of olive oil into the flame, whispering a prayer for warmth and sustenance. The scent mingles with the fading aromas of bread, wine, and herbs from the market. Nearby, a small cluster of children leaves a token offering, perhaps a tiny figurine or a flower, their curiosity balanced with reverence. You notice how seamlessly devotion and daily life blend here. Even in the city's quietest moments, a touch of the sacred persists. The street musicians linger as well, though their instruments now produce softer, slower melodies. A lyre hums a gentle chord, a flute breathes a thin, wistful note, and even the soft laughter of a juggler settling his props adds to the harmony of evening. You sense that music, like light, gradually fades but leaves a lingering resonance, echoing the Agora's vitality even as activity wanes. The food stalls, though nearly empty, still carry the faint scent of olive oil, honey, roasted meat, and herbs. You watch a woman carefully wrap the last cheeses in cloth, a small ritual of preservation and respect. Another merchant fills clay jars with wine for transport, adding corks and sealing them with wax. Even as the city quiets, the labor continues, not in haste, but with the steady attention of those who understand that every task, no matter how small, is a contribution to the city's enduring rhythm. A soft breeze flows through the colonnades, carrying the distant sounds of philosophers' debates, now gentler, reflective. A student leans against a marble column, listening to his mentor's words in the fading light. Even as we rest, the philosopher says quietly, thought never ceases. It moves with the city, unseen but persistent, shaping actions and habits in subtle ways. You sense that the Agora itself is a teacher, guiding through example, through presence, and through the quiet hum of life winding down. A small group of travelers prepares to leave, collecting their purchases and adjusting sandals and cloaks. A merchant waves farewell. A gentle joke passes between them, and the day's connections, fleeting but meaningful, are acknowledged once more. Even as commerce ends, the social rhythm of the city leaves traces in smiles, nods, and small exchanges. As the shadows lengthen, the fountains and statues take on a different character. Water reflects the twilight, and marble glows softly, transformed by the evening sun. You pause near a statue of Athena, her carved eyes calm and watchful. Even in the Agora's quiet moments, her presence feels alive, a reminder that the city is a tapestry woven from commerce, devotion, artistry, and thought. Somewhere nearby, a boy adjusts a small lamp near a temple, ensuring it flickers steadily into the night. The light is faint, but enough to illuminate offerings of grain, oil, and flowers. You notice how this simple act mirrors the care of every citizen in the Agora. Small gestures, consistent attention, an enduring rhythm that sustains the city from dawn to dusk. The streets themselves seem to sigh with relief. Dust settles, the clatter of sandals fades, and even the faint barking of a dog near the butcher's quarter softens. You sense that the Agora, though now quieter, remains alive in memory, in scent, in the lingering warmth of baked bread and wine, and in the invisible imprint of human activity, a city that never truly sleeps, even as it rests. You find a quiet spot on a low stone near the center of the market. The sun dips lower, painting the columns, statues, and marble steps with deep golden hues. You inhale deeply, tasting faint hints of honey, olive oil, herbs, and wine lingering in the air, and let the sounds and smells settle into your awareness. The city's pulse slows, but it has not stopped. It hums softly, a reminder that life continues even when the visible bustle has ended. The final merchants pack their goods, and a soft hush falls over the Agora. You notice a few late stragglers still wandering, a philosopher walking slowly, perhaps reflecting on the day's lessons, a child lingering near a fountain, reluctant to leave, a small dog wandering from stall to stall, sniffing the last crumbs of bread. The city, you realize, belongs to all of them and to none entirely, an ever-changing composition of presence, effort, and attention. The sun finally dips behind the hills, casting long shadows across the marble floors. The lamps flicker to life, small pinpricks of light glowing like fireflies against the darkening Agora. You feel a profound calm settle over the marketplace, the rhythm of the day fading gently, leaving a sense of completion, continuity, and quiet beauty. As evening embraces the Agora, you feel yourself slowing with it. The sense of bread, olives, and honey drift faintly in your memory, soft and persistent, mingling with the gentle echoes of laughter, music, and conversation. The city seems to exhale, releasing the tension of the day in slow, deliberate rhythm. You trudge lightly across the cobblestones, noticing the warmth left in the stone, the subtle shine of marble fading into twilight. You pause near a fountain, listening to the final trickle of water. The musicians' melodies have quieted, the philosopher's debate softened into reflection, and the artisan's tools lie at rest. The Agora is emptying, yet it feels whole, as if the traces of activity, Gestures, laughter, spoken words, careful hands remain etched invisibly into the air. You notice how every element of the city, from baked bread to sculpted marble, contributes to its gentle heartbeat, carrying life and memory even as the sun sets. You inhale one last deep breath, letting it fill your lungs slowly and gently. Imagine the warmth of the day, the faint scents, the soft sounds, the quiet smiles of those who labored, debated, and played. The city whispers its final goodnight, inviting you to rest alongside it, to fold into the calm, and to carry these gentle rhythms into your dreams. Now, let the Agora fade softly behind you. Feel its pulse quieting, its warmth lingering, and drift with the city into the embrace of evening, carried by the hum of life, labor, and quiet devotion. End of script. Sweet dreams.